This is Jess from 3D Learning Experts, and you're listening to the LD Experts Podcast, the show for busy parents who want to help their kids with learning disabilities, or as I like to say, learning differences, go from surviving to thriving. Hello, everybody. Today we are meeting with Heather Wright, who is a middle school IEP specialist, and she is going to talk about things that you guys are always asking about, or the things you need to know, because she is going to share with us the things that schools don't want us to know. So welcome, Heather.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Jess. I really appreciate the time today and having me on.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into your secrets that that the schools don't want people to know. So before you start with that, let's talk a little bit about your background and why you know these secrets.
So when I was a child, I went through middle school and hated it. I was throwing up every day. Honestly, it was the worst experience. I wanted to get to high school. So then when I had the opportunity to teach, I was like, I'm not teaching middle school. I hated middle school, and found out that I actually love teaching middle school and loved that group of kids because I could relate to them. I knew where they were coming from when they didn't want to come to class, or that they were nervous about their lockers and they were nervous about the math in the classroom or whatever. So I loved that piece of it. So when I walked out of that classroom into the consulting world, I was like, I don't have to leave middle school. I can still help the families that are going to be in that realm. So that's what brought me to middle school advocacy work, and why I know all the things behind the scenes as a special ed teacher or former special ed teacher. I'm going to consider myself a teacher forever, though. So I'm going to say current teacher, just not employed in the districts.
Hey, we're all teachers in one way or another.
We are.
So with your years working in special ed, what was that like? Like, what was a day in the life as a special ed teacher?
Paperwork, honestly. Lots of paperwork. But going into special education, you know that there's going to be a lot of paperwork. There's going to be a lot of IEPs. You're going to have to collect data on goals and objectives, all of that. What I loved about special education is the challenge of figuring out how a kid learned, because I struggled in school with math. And ironically, that's what I taught when I was a middle school teacher. I loved figuring out how the kids learned to be able to get them to a point that they didn't hate being in my class or being in class. But there were so many things that went on about special ed, like it was the minutia, the details that I always couldn't share with families as a teacher. I could think it. I could go to a meeting and say, well, we probably shouldn't say that, or maybe we should say something else. But I felt like I'd get my hand slapped for saying things, and I just didn't like that aspect of it.
Well, I've heard that some teachers are not allowed to share any information. They could lose their job if they suggest maybe a student has a learning challenge or struggle.
I mean, it could be. My experience in my own world of education, that was not the case, but I can't say that was accurate across the districts or across the county and across the country, because unfortunately, sometimes, like especially at this time of year, we're getting so close to the end of the school year that it's like, well, don't ask for that. Don't say that we could ask for an evaluation because we don't have time to do it. There's time still left. It's not too late, but it's pushing that limit. So what I say to families now is, if you're looking for that evaluation in special education, you need to do that now. Don't wait like another week or 2 weeks. You need to get that done. I have not had the experience with families that their teachers were getting fired for saying that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that actually did happen.
Well, and I'm sure the teachers weren't saying it either because they knew that they could lose their job if they did say it.
But, right. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's probably California where people are so sue happy anyway. Mm-hmm. And so that was my understanding, is And actually, I was talking to someone from Virginia, but she said that they are not allowed to say it because then they become liable and responsible as a school to provide certain things if someone wanted to sue them over it. So
yeah, I hear that with like if you go to a meeting, and you might have heard this with your own children. I know you spend a lot of your time with homeschooling, I believe, but in the public school, if teachers would say, well, your child needs a tutor, then that crosses a line right there, and they have to be very careful, because if a school or a teacher says your child needs tutoring, and they have to say needs it, not have you considered, but if they need that, then the school is reliable or liable for providing that support, and they would have to pay for that tutor or that support service. So the wording gets very hairy too. You have to be careful. Have you considered taking this to your doctor? Have you considered a tutor? If teachers say they need this or they require it, then the district is liable for doing that and holding the paying for the evaluation or paying for the tutor or whatever service the teacher said they required outside of a regular school day.
Well, and so often parents think that their teacher is going to tell them if they suspect an issue, but that's not the case. So what are some of the secrets that you can share with our audience to help them be better prepared for their journey in school?
Yeah, so let's talk about the first one that I get the most questions about, and I see on social media a lot of postings about it. Let's just say your child goes to school and they're struggling, and you as a parent goes into a meeting and you want an evaluation. You found that it's time for a special education evaluation, and you request from the school in writing, please make sure that it's in writing, that you ask for a special education evaluation, and the school says, well, we can't do the evaluation until RTI, so response to intervention, data is completed, or we need to have a certain amount to start. That's not accurate. So according to IDEA law, RTI, the response to intervention, can happen simultaneously with an evaluation. So you do not have to wait until the interventions are completely done to get that evaluation process started. Now, there does need to be intervention data for initial eligibility for special education, but you don't have to wait until it's all done or for a set amount of time. So that's the first thing. Please don't let them tell you that you have to wait for the data to be done in order to start the evaluation process. You tell them that you know better and that we can start the evaluation process now. If they push back on that, or if you hear, because you might hear this with the students that you are engaged or involved with on a daily basis too, with their parents, that parents will say, they said we don't do that here. We're not going to do that. That happens. I hear about that all the time. And about that, and going along with the evaluation process or the RTI process, ask for the policy. If they're going to say, well, we don't do that here, you politely say, can I please see the policy that says that you won't do X, Y, or Z, or that RTI has to be done before the evaluation process can get started. Ask for the policy. I did a training the other day, and the parents were like, we're going to make shirts that say, ask for the policy. Because they had never heard that before. Ask for the policy. And you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be disrespectful, but you can say, please share with me the written policy on whatever that is that you're denying me. So asking for the policy, RTI doesn't have to wait until the end of the evaluation process or the end to start the evaluation process. Another one I get all the time is about extended school year. So I'm not sure, Jess, if you know what extended school year is, but it is not the same as summer school. ESY is only based on IEP goals and objectives, not if they failed a core content academic class. So I get a lot of the time, well, they said that ESY can only be provided in the summertime. Well, that can be when it happens, but it also can happen throughout the school year. I worked with a client at the end of last year that they were going on a family vacation over the summer and they weren't going to be around for summer to do ESY. So we were able to get extended school year, or ESY, in the month of May. It was done before school. I think a couple sessions were done after school, but it can be done throughout the school year, and you do not have to wait until the summertime to do extended school year. So that's another misconception in the community.
And do they need to have a particular amount of severity to be able to qualify for that?
So there are multiple categories and questions that you should be asking and should be discussing at the IEP table when making that decision. A lot of the times they'll say it's only for regression. Yes, ESY, the discussion about ESY can be made for regression, but it's also recoupment of skills over extended periods of time, the severity of a disability, progress on goals and objectives in the IEP, as well as are they at a critical point of instruction. So it's not just one factor that they say yes or no to. You have to look at the whole child and not just, again, most of the time I hear, well, they said he didn't regress. Okay, well, let's look at the other options and look at the other questions. And does he recoup skills over a period of time? How severe is his disability? Has he made progress on goals and objectives? So don't just let them tell you it's about the severity of the disability either. There's other questions that need to be considered when talking about ESY. So a lot of the times too, parents will say, well, they told me that we can discuss ESY, or we can discuss this at the annual IEP meeting. Yeah. IEPs can be and have to be talked about every year, but you can call a meeting whenever you want to. So if you have a meeting today and you just felt like something wasn't going in the pit of your stomach, you're like, oh, I just felt uneasy about that, and they say they finalized the IEP, you could call a meeting tomorrow and open that document back up. You can call a meeting whenever you deem necessary. Now, if it's something like you wanted to change the wording on said, I don't know, like it's consider instead of required, if that word, maybe it doesn't require a whole meeting, but if you need to talk about placement, goals and objectives, accommodations, basically anything, the meat and potatoes of the IEP, you can call a meeting at any time. Don't wait until you get to a point where you're so upset and frustrated. So
now, I mean, you can't realistically say, I want a meeting tomorrow. Can
No, you can, but you can ask them to schedule a meeting. Like, you want to have another meeting and get a time on the books, but
okay,
that's what I meant by that. Like, you can finish it today, and then, in 2 weeks, you could have another meeting as long as the team is available. You don't have to wait until 365 days later to address some of those concerns. Another one that I hear all the time is that my child's IEP is going to expire. And I love that one. I love it. So the IEP does go for 365 days. It's good for a year. And guidelines for the state always say you need to do it within a year. Yes, you need to review the IEP annually. However, if you are in conversations with the school, or even if you're not, and that IEP says that it's valid until 3/13. So let's say today, tomorrow, it's not like poof, that IEP is going to go away. Like, it's not going to catch on fire and go, off into existence. It's still there. We still need to document everything, and you need to have that meeting so it doesn't expire. And please, I was actually sitting at a table at a school, and a teacher said in front of the whole team, well, his IEP is going to expire and he could lose services. No, that's not how it works. And I don't blame the teacher. The teacher had misinformation probably from her boss, who had misinformation and misunderstanding. So please understand that it doesn't expire. Yes, the IEP technically ends that day, but it's not just going to go away. We still have to have the meeting. Your children are not going to lose services if the IEP meeting is a day, 2 days, even a month late, to be honest. The lateness comes from timelines that the district is going to face from the state being late, not because the IEP is going to poof disappear. So please, that's a myth I want to bust. The IEPs do not expire.
Well, and you brought up a great point that teachers get the misinformation from their supervisor, who gets the misinformation from their supervisor. That seems to, I hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. That seems to be a common occurrence. Is there anything you can expand on that. Like why that happens or how that happens or what parents can do to help that not happen. Is there anything parents can do about
I mean, honestly, there is training that can be added to the IEP. So there is a section under the accommodations page of the IEP that says supports for school personnel. And that's a place that you can add training for adults, teachers, paraprofessionals. You can ask for training for yourself as a parent too in there. And that can be provided at no cost to the parents and no cost to the districts. Like if you needed teacher training on behavior plans, you could ask them that everybody be trained on that. They can ask for those types of trainings in that section of the IEP. If you come across where the teacher has misinformation from somewhere, you can ask for training for teachers on whatever those topics are. I had to ask some teachers for more training on positive supports for kids and how they address kids because they were putting their hands on kids and not restraining kids, but grabbed an apple out of this kid's hand because he wouldn't give it back to him, back to the teacher. And I said, well, why is our first reaction to just put our hands on a kid? Like we need to have some of those positive intervention conversations. So that's a great place to start and put it in there. Always put things in writing. So if you come to a meeting and a teacher says that and you find that that's not accurate, please put it in writing. Please take it to admin if you need to and just say, this is what was shared. This is incorrect. We need to get some better information and guidance. And again, go back to what's the policy on that. That's what I would ask for families and sharing that with them. Okay, so then again, going back to asking for the policy, just anytime that you have that gut feeling as a parent that maybe you feel like somebody is saying something inaccurate, or you just feel that, you know what that gut feeling is like, Jess, you know that, like you get that like mother's intuition and you're like, something just doesn't sit right with me, ask for the policy. You can also ask, so parents are equal members of the IEP team, and they should have all of the same information that the school has. And on social media, teachers out there, they'll say, well, sending any draft documents home before a meeting is predetermination. And predetermination is illegal, so you can't predetermine placement. You can't make a decision outside the IEP meeting based on goals and objectives on placement or anything. All of that has to happen inside of a meeting. But sending a draft home of that IEP is super important for parents to have the information prior to going into that classroom, that table, group of people. You get to ask the questions, you get to see what they're proposing, you get to come and have meaningful input. And it also lets the team and you as a mom or a dad or a grandparent, whoever's there coming to the table, have little to no surprises. I'm not a surprise person. I don't like surprise birthdays. I don't like any surprises. I just want it to be what I like. So make sure that you're sending, and parents, you can ask for a draft of the documents, and that includes raw data samples. So actual physical work samples of your child's work can be sent home with that draft paperwork. And I tell my clients at least 3 days. If it's the day before, fine and dandy, but you can absolutely request that that meeting is postponed so you can have meaningful input. And that's a key word for families. You want to say meaningful input. Your rights as a parent, your parental rights say that you have the right to have meaningful input. And by having those draft documents allows you to have that. Yes, raw data samples. Most families don't even know that they can ask for those raw data samples on the progress reports. And that includes eligibility reports too. So if you go into an eligibility, you can see the private or the psychological evaluations, you can see the OT evaluations, the PT, speech, any of that. You can get that ahead of time so you're not blindsided at the meeting. And one of my last tips for families is, I don't know exactly what tests you guys take in California, but in Georgia, where I am, we take the Georgia Milestones Assessment. That's a standardized test that they take every spring that kind of evaluates where your child is on these standardized measures. And I'm not against standardized testing, but for our special ed population, when I was teaching, I was like, why aren't we having like a growth mindset that they've, increased by 20% over last year to this year. But that's not the case. In Georgia, they have to hit a certain number in order to pass the test. You can opt out of that assessment basically from kindergarten through 8th grade. As a high schooler, those tests are looked at like end of course tests and end of grade tests and have to meet the high school requirements. But you, specifically in middle school, can request that your child not take it and opt out of it.
Is that federal that they need to have them in high school? Or is that
in the state of Georgia? I know that we have in Georgia. I'm not sure about other states.
Yeah, okay. Because I don't think that's federal, because I opted out of my son having any testing other than his junior year. I did the what you were just talking about, the assessment to see where he was at grade level. Right. That's the only test he's ever taken in his entire life.
Right. So. Yeah. I mean, my kids in middle school, my parents would say, do they need to take this test? Off the record, I could tell you.
Right. Yeah, because the schools don't want you to opt out of them because that's how they get their funding.
They do get funding for, and it's called a CCRPI in the state of Georgia. I don't know what it is other places, and you could look it up on the Department of Education's website for your state. But in Georgia, they get CCRPI scores that basically rates the progress of the school, and they get money for that. So the more kids that don't take the test, it kind of puts them lower and looks negative. But you can opt out in the state of Georgia. Look at your state. There's also, like for our state, there's a Facebook group for families that want to opt out of, I think it's called Opt Out Georgia or Opt Out something. Look at the Department of Education's website. That'll tell you if you can opt out. And if your child is not ready to take those tests, or you just don't want your child to take those tests. I had a lot of my kids that had severe anxiety with test taking, and it was like their parents were like, no, I don't want them to take this test. It doesn't give me valid information. It doesn't really accurately reflect how they do in class or their abilities. They would opt them out. So you can absolutely see if your state allows that. And if you're in the state of Georgia, specifically K-8, you can opt them out and not have a problem. It might be able to happen in high school, but I also know in Georgia, that's part of their graduation requirements as the end of course test.
Wow, that is interesting. So I've lived and had kids in public school in California, Texas, and Nevada, and none of those states use those for the high school requirements.
Yeah, it's all different. Unfortunately, state requirements all over the country are so different.
Yeah.
And even federal guidelines for special ed.
A lot of the IEP stuff is federal. So I didn't realize there was also state regulations that can apply.
It is. So you have to have the umbrella of IDEA law, so the federal guidelines, and then the states look at that and they have to, how are they interpreting that law? So it can be challenging sometimes. Like in the state of Georgia, it's 60 days to sign an initial consent to have the evaluation completed for special education. In other states, they get 70 days. So look at the state guidelines for that, or have an advocate or a consultant that knows about the state regulations so that they can guide you with that process and know the exact timelines, because it's not from when the consent is given to a parent, it's when it's received to the school. So if you sit on that evaluation request for 2 weeks, then that consent doesn't start, the timeline doesn't start until you send it back into the district. So make sure you do that. And that's in general. So whatever state you're in, sign the consent for evaluation and be sure to ask what assessments they could potentially give you or give your child.
In the meantime, or
no, well, before that, yes. Like, so when you're at a meeting, they have to schedule a meeting to, if you're asking for a direct referral for an evaluation, they're scheduling the meeting to discuss what that process looks like. Make sure that you are understanding what assessments could be done for your child, but also go in there with what concerns you have as a parent. So why are you asking for the evaluation? Are you asking it because they just got a recent medical diagnosis of autism and you're looking at autism eligibility? Well, autism eligibility, medical versus educational, are different. So just because you have a medical diagnosis of autism doesn't automatically mean that you're going to get eligibility in the school system. You also have to have a speech and language component in order for you to qualify for autism in the school system. So those are kind of those nuances of special education that's like, they have autism, they medically diagnosed autism. Why isn't the school saying yes? There has to be the process and meeting the state criteria for eligibility on that too. But know why you're asking for that evaluation. They're struggling with maybe executive functioning skills. They've had low test grades. Maybe it's not even low test grades. Maybe it's anxiety, depression, other mental illnesses kind of thing. We can look at that for eligibility. You also have to have, in order for it to be eligibility for special education, you have to have the academic impact, but you also have to have a need for specially designed instruction. So you have to have both of those to be able to get an IEP. So make sure you have all of those and get your ducks in a row. And I was just reading on social media, somebody had just asked, can I do a private evaluation and have a school evaluation? Yes, you can. You can have both. But the private and the school evaluation cannot have the same testing paperwork protocols. So they both can't have the Wyatt. One can have the Wyatt, one can have KTA. Those are for academic achievement. If you're going to look at an IQ assessment, they have to be different. They can't be the same protocols. But yes, you can have both at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yes, there's a lot. It's a lot of information, and I love it. I love just all of the special ed pieces of that.
And so what's that?
I said, and just telling parents and educating families. So my goal and role as an advocate or a consultant is to advocate for the child, but also to educate parents about what they can ask for inside those meetings. I hear it all the time. Heather, I didn't know that we could ask for that. You can.
Can you help students outside of Georgia, or do you only have clients within the state of Georgia?
Currently, I do have clients outside of the state of Georgia. So I've worked with families in Alabama, and I've worked with clients in Pennsylvania, and of course, Georgia. That's where I'm from. I had a phone consult with a potential client in California 2 weeks ago. They just haven't gotten back to me yet, but I can absolutely work out of state. Because again, like I said, federal law is federal law. And even if I haven't worked in a state that you live in, I'm more than welcome and more than willing to do all of the research on the laws. And I have a network of people that work in different states. I can, reach out to them too. Like one of my good friends is, she lives in Colorado, but she taught in Idaho and California. So I can reach out to her and say, what can I do for here? And what are the roles? But I do work mostly in the state of Georgia, but can work out of state as well.
Okay, great. And what is the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Two ways. You can visit me on my website. It's heatherwrightconsultant.com, or you can email me directly at hwright.consultant@gmail. It's probably easier to just go to my website. Everything filters through me. The first point of contact is a free consultation. So for anybody that's listening to this going, how do I get an evaluation? How do I ask for the policy? How do I get extended school year, not in the summertime? Schedule a consult with me. I'm happy to just go through things. It's 30 minutes. It's free. My husband would tell you I can't sell a ladder to a fireman, so I'm not going to try to oversell you anything. I'm not a salesman. He's a sales guy. He could sell you anything. I'm not going to oversell you, but I'll do the 30-minute consultation for you, and it's a good way to see how I can support you and if we're a good fit. Because this, working with your own business, sometimes you just get people that maybe need more support than maybe my expertise has, or maybe you're going from pre-K into kindergarten right now. And I'm like, well, I could probably manage that, but that's not in my wheelhouse. Or you're looking at like a 12th grader going into transition into, what post-secondary looks like. I could rely on somebody else and recommend somebody else, but go to my website, heatherwrightconsultant.com, and you can get everything scheduled there. You can see my services. You can see all the things that I offer families.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather, so much for your time and sharing the secrets that the schools don't want parents to know?
You're welcome. I'm sure there's plenty of more. I just didn't want to spend hours upon hours and upon hours, but it's been lovely talking with you, Jess. And again, for all of your viewers and watchers, just know that you're not alone at the special ed table. Whether you reach out to me, please reach out to somebody, have somebody at that IEP table that you can feel supported with. You don't have to be alone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.